in life, obviously, in a lot of professions, sometimes it's not as life and death as kind of your role, but people have got to make decisions, and there'd be people listening to this episode. What did you most learn through that time around making those decisions in those, kind of pressure cooker scenarios?
Push decisions down as low as they can be made. So empower people to make their own decisions whenever and wherever possible. And one of the ways to enable that is to be really clear about your intention. In other words, what's the big picture and outcome that we're actually seeking here? Don't expect everyone to be happy with every decision that you make, and don't take it personally, because we don't necessarily have all of the information ourselves. As I said, when you've got the intent, when you've got the end state, that helps to narrow people's focus, but it still doesn't mean you're going to get the right decision every time.
No. So first was obviously lower decisions, like decisions in the lower end. And then you've obviously stepped on to number 2, which was, your type 1 and 2.
Yeah. And then from there, it kind of jumps when it comes to decision making to, don't expect everyone to be happy with every decision that you make, and don't take it personally. And, because we don't necessarily have all of the information ourselves. As I said, when you've got the intent, when you've got the end state, that helps to narrow people's focus, but it still doesn't mean you're going to get the right decision every time. And there are at times when there's personal agendas or personal preferences at play, and you need to be mindful of that. Don't try to play to that. I'm not a fan of people playing to personalities at all. But at the same time, just be mindful that they exist. And then if you do end up getting a rap over the knuckles, then have the courage of your conviction, explain why it is, whatever happened, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, also be able to take it on the chin and don't take it personally. And if the boss tells you, no, we're going to change and do it this way, then okay, salute proudly and carry on with the new way. That said, one of the other things I've learned, and it's particularly relevant in the civilian world, right? And it's understanding the difference between leadership and followership. And I personally think that leading in the civilian world is way more difficult than leading in the military.
Why is that?
Oh, absolutely it is. It is absolutely far more difficult to lead in the civilian world. And it's simply because in the military, we have the authority of command. So we actually have a legal authority that allows each rank and certain positions within each rank as you go up to have legal authority over their subordinates to command them to do X, Y, or Z. And the subordinate has to do it because that's the way the rules are, right? Now, in the civilian world, and I've seen this first case myself a couple of times, you get there as the leader, as the manager, and you say, okay, guys, we're going to go and do X, Y, Z. And a couple of people nod and a couple of people look across the table and say, no, I'm not. Right. Okay. Why not? No, because I reckon that's crap. Because I reckon that's rubbish. Because no, I've seen that before and it doesn't work. All the different reasons come out. And so talk about needing to influence people. Talk about needing to actually lead people. And leading is very different to commanding. And so definitely learnt this the hard way a couple of times in the civilian world. And so where this is going is to understand the difference between leadership and followership. There isn't really the need for followership in the military, but in the civilian world, there is absolutely the need for followership. Followership does exist in the military, but it's really, really prevalent and really needed in the civilian world. And followership, there's a model around followership, and basically it goes everything from being a sheep, just a yes man who doesn't think at all, has no thought of their own, but just, yep, okay, yep, okay, yep, okay. And sure, they're great. They will blindly follow you and do everything that you ask them to do, but they're not really value adding in any great way. And then there's a deliberate obstructionist, and then there's someone who's deliberate obstructionist, and someone who's thinking for themselves and just wanting to keep saying no. And then you got someone else who's wanting to think for themselves, and they play they're happy sometimes, not happy other times. They're a bit of a swing voter kind of thing, all the way through to someone who is, for all intents and purposes, a leader. For all intents and purposes, motivates the team, influences the team, is a self-starter, is a self-thinker. When you ask them to do something, they will absolutely think through the intent to go, what's the best way to do this? And how can I support the boss in the best way? And blah, blah, blah. And so that's, the highest level of followership. And as the leader, you need to be able to identify all these different types of followers and understand, how do I connect with these people in a way so that when we're making decisions, I can get them to make decisions at the lowest level, and I can get them to support my decisions. And so that I can have influence, and I can lead these people to what we need to do and what we need to achieve. So yeah, a bit of a sprinkling, a whole raft of different. I've learned
some great insights and some great advice there for leaders listening, or anyone really listening around, whether they're working with an organization, whether they're leading an organization. I think that's some really great insights there. I wanted to ask, obviously, and we'll get back to your story now, around that rock bottom moment. I suppose, there's a service and there's a massive sacrifice for people that work in the military. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. I've got friends that have been in the military. I know friends that can't work anymore because they severe PTSD, mental health, the trauma of battle. And it is there's the battle on the battlefields, but then there's the hidden battle that they bring home, right? The hidden battle that sits behind, as you say, that proud person. So, talk to me about what did you start to see, or what were some of the signs that when you look back were probably warning signs that you probably could have maybe sought help earlier?
Yeah. So, for me, I did seek out some help earlier.
Okay.
And, I guess so if I go right back, so the start for me that I completely didn't recognize what it was at the time, was after I was home from my first deployment to East Timor, which was, quite innocuous, really. Nothing really happened. And going into a shopping centre here in Brisbane to get a loaf of bread, and what seemed like a flood, as you go through the big double glass doors, what seemed like a flood of people came towards me. And I just flattened myself against the glass shop front, like literally just threw myself out of the way. And I remember almost looking at myself going, what's going on with you? Like, what's happening there? And not being able to answer, like just having no words, no clue what was happening. And the flood of people eventually turned to a trickle, and I peeled myself off the glass, got the loaf of bread and ran away. And I didn't tell my wife, I didn't tell my mates, I didn't tell anybody about that, because I was just completely confused. And I now know that was a panic attack. But I don't remember racing heart. I don't remember sweaty palms or anything. It just happened like that so quickly. And but at the time, just no understanding around what that was. And then, come through to 2003 after the deployment to Iraq, and I waking in the middle of the night, and this is where the bullying and the interpersonal and the toxic culture, all that kind of stuff really came in. And I'm waking in the middle of the night after I got back from that deployment, my wife lying next to me, and I'm screaming and crying, and and I turned to her and I said, am I normal? What the hell is happening to me? And, but again, being messed in the head was career termination for the ADF. So I certainly wasn't telling anybody at work. And so that was the start of me asking my wife, Megan, to keep it a secret. Right. And so that was 2003. And that was when I knew something wasn't right. And then there was some more bullying at work and whatnot. And to the point where I actually couldn't raise my hand in public to ask a question because I'd literally chest poked and abused and whatever else about not asking a question. Interestingly enough. And, and then come through to 2007 in Afghanistan, and I'm just continually angry and frustrated, and is that the stress, the workload, again, a couple of key individuals deployed in Afghanistan as well as back in Australia, just making my life an absolute living misery. And I got to the point where I was addressing down, talking to a young officer, and I realized they weren't looking at my face; they were looking at my hands, and my hands were just shaking like crazy. And I couldn't stop them. No matter how much I tried to stop my hands shaking, I could not stop them. And that was when I really knew the game was up. And so when we leave operational deployments, we fill out these forms, for psychological screening. And then we go and have a chat with a psychologist. And I had a chat with the psych, and I fessed up for what was going on for me and said, I need help. I need to see somebody. And unfortunately, it was another 3 months until I got to see a psychologist after I got home. And the two of us just did not gel. We did not gel at all. And I said, I'm done with this. I'm not going to bother any more psych work. And I just thought, if this is the best the army can do, and this is the best that psychology as a field can do, then I'll do it myself. Thank you very much. I'll just take care of it. And so I started hitting the bottle. And so that was, there's a couple of little flags in there so far, but I'll tell you what, when I was smashing the bottle every afternoon, then, and I wouldn't finish till the bottle was empty, whatever the bottle was. And it just one afternoon after the other. It's like, oh my God, look back now, it's so out of character. But at the time, that was just the numbing that I was doing. And of course, abusing alcohol, sleep was terrible again. So night terrors really started kicking in. Same individual from a few years earlier. I was back in the same working environment again. And so just the bullying at work really started picking up. I had 3 kids under 8 and, lots of noise and mess and everything else at home around that. And I had a fuse that was this short. And so that was the last thing that I wanted to be around. And so I didn't want to be at work, and I didn't want to be at home, and I didn't want to be awake, and I didn't want to be asleep. I didn't want to be anywhere. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to be anymore. And that was when I seriously started looking at different ways to end my life. Yeah. And then, when it came to it, Monday morning at home laying papers, and no matter what I was doing, I'm a fairly handy guy, out in the yard and in the house and all the rest of it. But no matter what I was doing, it was not working. And the less job I did, the more I told myself how much of a poor job I was doing. And I told myself that, the weaker I felt, the worse job I did, the more I told myself. And so this cycle started, and it accelerated just so quickly. And before I knew it, I'm saying to myself, now's the time, do it. Now's the time. And it just came out of nowhere. But in that moment, even though I knew it was not rational, in that moment, it seemed so plausible, so reasonable, so rational, that, I've tried all these other things and this isn't working, and they don't care, and this isn't working now, and I'm just useless and I'm done. I've had enough of trying. And, and so that was the thing that really scared me, I guess, quite a bit at that time, was how quickly out of nowhere that little voice appeared for me to, now's the time, do it.